We are back with more NFL coverage, and I'm not going to lie to you. All of it, every single thing, for the most part, that has happened in the league since the last video I put out, have just been centered around people getting fucking hurt left and right. It's absolutely insane. To start things out with what might be the most devastating, one of the more devastating injuries, rather, in this time would be suffered by none other than Rashawn Slater. Obviously just got a 4-year, $114 million contract extension with the Chargers, and I was literally stating in that particular video that you would want him to play out that contract in the healthiest manner possible. And less than just a few days after signing that deal, Rashawn Slater would suffer a knee injury that ended his season before it even started. As great as Rashawn Slater has been, it certainly hurts a Chargers offense trying to continue their form of efficiency from last year, while planning to be at least a little more aggressive by now reinforcing their wide receiver core and also having a sort of balanced attack with their new running back room. Slater would have played a heavy part in that. And now that he's gone, Harbaugh essentially has had to pivot. Now, the moves he would make in terms of getting this new offensive line without Rashawn Slater set up actually make a lot of sense. As he would move Joe Alt, the rookie from last year, over to the blindside position, and he would also move Trey Pipkins III to right tackle. Now, I don't know that much about Pipkins III necessarily, but he should be able to hold down that fort for long enough, and I do think it's pretty damn smart to have Alt. As great as he was last year and as generational of a talent as he is in terms of the left tackle, well, any tackle spot, moving him over and having him be your blindside blocker, even if it is a foreign task for him to take on in the NFL, feels like he could fill out that role very well for them. That's certainly what they're banking on. There is only a minimal drop-off there, and that's just because Alt hasn't logged in the years that Slater has to this point. That's it. That is the only separator. Like, he's established himself as one of the better linemen in the NFL right now, and he's still relatively young. So, having that body over there just makes it a harder task for defensive linemen on that side to deal with. Like, he's uber talented. So, that it makes sense. You know, that's what some of these teams, a lot of these teams are going to have to do. They're going to have to find different ways to adjust. At least the Chargers were built for it to where, even though you weren't necessarily expecting it to happen, you have a bit of a contingency plan here. Preseason action would also get underway. And, you know, obviously, wins and losses don't matter. A lot of teams would actually tie their games because there are no overtime periods in the preseason. Like, why would you want to stick around for an extended period of time in a game that relatively doesn't mean much compared to the regular season and the playoffs? So from that perspective, you can understand why they wouldn't want to hold people for much longer. But what matters the most here is development, right? A lot of the people that do end up participating in preseason action are trying to make it to a roster spot in the NFL, generally speaking. They could be on the bubble and trying to rise up the ranks to the 53-man roster. They might get cut, but they might be trying to put out enough good tape to get picked up by another team in the league. And you also have a blend of younger and older guys in this position. There are some people who might have been coming over from like the UFL or other forms of football trying to prove themselves in the NFL. You could have younger guys who have been in the league for a few years and just haven't gotten the opportunities yet, looking for a chance to prove what they can provide for a team. Just a fresh balance of new faces and, I guess, older counterparts looking to establish themselves in the NFL in some way on an active roster and elevate themselves from the practice squad or undrafted free agency into at least a solid contributor. And, in certain cases, legitimate superstars. Obviously, you'll have some of the starting caliber players play for a few reps in any given game, but it's mostly going to be surrounded by names and faces that you haven't really heard all that much about before. And also, again, rookies, second-year players, third-year players trying to make a name for themselves as well, even though they might have gotten swept under the rug in certain cases. Anthony Richardson Sr. is in a weird spot. Obviously, you have Daniel Jones coming to the Colts in the offseason, and you have them also drafting Riley Leonard in what is a very odd quarterback battle. Yet, for this preseason, they've chosen to kind of alternate starts between both Richardson Sr. and Daniel Jones. So, with the Colts-Ravens preseason game on Thursday, he would get the start, and he played for just a small amount of time. I honestly thought he did fairly well. But his time in the game would be cut even shorter than it was intended to be, because you had David Ojabo on a longer down come in and completely crash blitz the hell out of Richardson Sr., just stymieing him in the backfield, pummeling him down to the ground on a pretty powerful sack, to say the least. And after that play, Richardson Sr., I guess, was grimacing a little bit. He would eventually be taken out for the rest of the game. And he would be diagnosed in the days to follow with a dislocated pinky finger. So it kept him out for the rest of that game. And, there were questions about how serious it was. It ended up not being too major. He was able to get work done on it, and he is scheduled to return to practice. He's scheduled to play in the next game, where I think he'll be starting the second half, while Daniel Jones starts out the first. At least for the Colts fans out there, because, again, even if this is an undecided battle, you still want Anthony Richardson Sr. to have the best chance imaginable. And you just, every time he gets injured, it's going to be just hell to think about if you're in that position. Like, you have to caution every single time some development of that sort goes down with him. But the worst did not happen. That would be reserved, unfortunately, for one of the Ravens' rookie cornerbacks that they drafted this season, and honestly, both of them. Because Bilal Kone was a late-round pick from Western Michigan by the team in this draft. And as he was trying to defend one of the Colts wide receivers in the red zone, a pass was headed his way. He was trying to deflect it, as the wide receiver was also trying to make a play on the ball, even though it was heavily overthrown at that point. And as all of that is going down, although I didn't see it in real time, as soon as I looked back up on the screen after the shit happened, it was just a very hard sight to see. Very difficult to watch if you did watch it in real time. But what essentially happened with Kone is that his leg completely snapped and was twisted in a completely different direction. Like, just think about this. Think about your standard right angle. That is how his leg was after the play was finished. That is definitely not a spot you want to be in. And with that going down, he is now set to miss his entire rookie season due to that injury. I mean, they obviously have to get surgery on that immediately. Then he's got to learn how exactly to properly recuperate all of the specific joints and bones in that area so that he can start to walk again. And then gradually work his way up into doing football work. You just hope that he can actually get an efficient recovery out of it. But it's horrible. A rookie cornerback just trying to make a routine play, and you have your leg snap. Wild injury indeed. But again, they can happen. They can continuously sneak up on you. And Tyreek Hill would deal with the same thing. He is currently facing an oblique injury right now. But I guess they also haven't really made a decision on whether or not he's going to play the preseason. Anyways, we'll see how that injury is. Also, interesting note here, since I'm mentioning Tyreek Hill, although he is still designated with the hamstring injury, Dwayne Eskridge actually did play against the Bears yesterday. So it was good to still see him out there getting some reps, and he actually played very well in his role. Got a few solid returns, got some pretty good catches in. So I really do question him playing on it if it's a severe injury. But again, he's in that spot where he is legitimately trying to prove himself. I thought his chances were done. But, if he's still going out there fighting and trying to secure a roster spot for himself, that is commendable, honestly. You got to give it up to him there. Jimmie Ward, the Texans safety, would face another arrest last week. He was actually arrested yet again in relation to the first arrest he had this offseason. If you don't remember that one, he was arrested on June 12th on a felony charge of assault of a family member. And I guess per some clauses in that, there were specific things that he couldn't violate, or else he would be pursued again and arrested. That is the case with a lot of different crimes, right? You do them, and you may get arrested for something. Even if it's not the most severe thing in the world, they just want to caution that you're not going to repeat the same offense over and over and over and over and over again. So any number of things that they can implement to prevent that from happening, they will dish out. And I guess one of those things was something that Ward was not aware of. He violated it and would be arrested again on Thursday. Because according to this quote here, according to the Montgomery County Jail website, Ward was arrested Thursday on a warrant related to a felony offense. So there were questions surrounding what exactly it was connected to, if anything at all, and it ended up being connected to the same case that I just outlined. I guess a clause of that, as they detail in this article, was that he wasn't allowed to consume alcohol. And I guess, unconsciously, a player in his position, or just any person in his position, you're probably just doing whatever with a group of friends, or so be it. And you just want to, I guess, treat yourself to a drink or something. It happens. I guess he wasn't aware of this somehow, that you couldn't violate this specific clause by consuming any alcohol. Instincts are going to tell you to just do it just because. Like, there shouldn't be anything realistically stopping you from doing it. But it ended up being the case for him, and they got right on his ass and arrested him. He did bond out, and they detail in these articles that there will be hearings on the original arrest. It could be delayed, as they also detail in this article, or at least they strongly suggest that that is the result this next hearing could have. But I will say again, if that's still up, which, as they state here, this is going down on August 13th in literally just a couple of days. But you're already finding yourself in that spot where you're committing further violations related to the same crime. Even if, again, there's just not really an issue in a normal situation with him having a drink. But, understanding that this just heightens the activity surrounding this potential trial here, it doesn't help his cause or paint him in the most redeeming light amongst whoever is going to sit as a juror in this case. But hopefully you can stay out of further trouble related to this and actually handle this case properly, whether or not he is found fully guilty of this. It would be detailed that Billy Howton, a Packers legend, in all honesty, would pass away at the age of 95 last week. He, in the NFL, played the end position. Yeah, you heard that right. Not your typical defensive end positions, but just a straight up end position. I think I detailed this in one of the recap videos where Jahmyr Gibbs set a record tying a former Lion split end. And essentially that position is just kind of an alternative name for a wide receiver. You still have wide receivers back then. I guess they just wanted to get fancy and give a designation to those players who were literally on the ends of the offensive line, but still out wide to an extent. That is the role that Howton played on his teams, and honestly, he was damn good at it. As they detailed throughout his entire career within this article, he was just a record setter consistently. His 257 receiving yards against the Rams in 1956 are a franchise record that still stands to this day. At the time of his retirement in 1963, according to this article on NFL.com as well, he led in receptions with 503 and receiving yards with 8,459. He also, in his career, became the first NFL rookie with a 1,000-yard receiving season. Like, just straight up, throughout his entire career, being a dominant force. He also had another 1,000-yard receiving season in his career with 1,188 yards and 12 touchdowns in that same 1956 season. For as great of a player and as prolific of a player as he might have been in his time, his legacy will probably be defined more by what he did off the field for NFL players, because he was actually the organization's first president. As this quote states right here, Howton was a consistent presence in the NFLPA during its early years and attended every player rep meeting between 1956 and 1961. He represented the Packers at the first NFLPA meeting in 1956 and brought with him a list of 4 grievances that famously included the need for clean towels, shirts, and jock straps for second practices when NFL teams held 2 practices a day. This article, in literally the next paragraph, states that he was pretty much responsible for creating the pension in the NFL. As if they didn't establish it, he was threatening to bring an antitrust lawsuit against the NFL. And in 1959, surely enough, they caved to that request. So, even though it still comes under a little bit of scrutiny due to what exactly they cover and some of the other things that they tend to leave out in ensuring that NFL players are all set after they retire or move on from the league, there wouldn't be anything of that sort in the first place without the contributions of Howton. So that's definitely major stuff. He definitely lived a very good life, and they mention here that he survived by 3 children as well. They surely have a lot to be proud of in that moment, even though they will certainly miss him, because of course. And a lot of the other lives that he affected during this time probably feel the same way as well. But to have that kind of contribution on your resume makes you pretty much invaluable to almost every single person who has had any experience with the NFL at this point. And that certainly cannot be taken away from him. That is just timeless. Forever going to be recognized in the annals of history for that alone. The Cowboys would sign Malik Davis. I do not understand it. Again, given the amount of money that you have wrapped up or could potentially have wrapped up in your best players on the team, are actively hurting your chances to go out and get quality players in free agency. And you get down to such a point where you have to settle for re-signing a player who did actually play there for a couple of seasons, 2022 and 2023. Yet Davis, even with that overall line in Dallas struggling and with their overall running back contributions dwindling a little bit, this man in his time there played 15 games overall and has just 31 carries for 161 yards and a touchdown. All of that coming in his first NFL season. He appeared in 3 games and didn't record a stat. And you believe that now, 2 years later, with a totally different roster, with receiving talents that are dynamic in Lamb and Pickens, Ferguson being a solid tight end, you think that Davis will somehow be able to turn into something he hasn't proven to be yet, and be productive enough to warrant stealing carries away from Sanders and Williams, even though their last few seasons haven't been all that great either. This is just a pointless signing, I believe. Truly. I don't, you gotta have depth, yes. And from that perspective, maybe. But I just don't know what they believe they're going to get out of him at this point. He hasn't done much of anything with them at all. And that's supposed to change now? With him being older? I don't get that. That's just a strange move for them to make. And then you have even more injuries on the docket. Rondale Moore, for instance, they're facing off against the Texans, and he is trying to go for the ball. Then as that play ends, which ended up being a third down, they try to move on to fourth down and get things set up, but you have Rondale Moore still on the sideline, not getting up for minutes on end. They go out, and they check on him, and he's still down. All of a sudden, they're saying that he's hurt, and that for the amount of time he's gone down for, it doesn't look like the best of injuries. This is a person in Rondale Moore who last season missed the entire year due to injury. And I was in that moment instantly thinking there's no way that he's down with an injury again. I would hope that it isn't anything severe, but he already missed that amount of time. There's no way he could possibly go through something like that again. Now, he is getting MRIs done at this point, and they haven't necessarily determined his availability for the season, but they did acknowledge that he has suffered a significant knee injury. And it's just man, that sucks. Because when he is healthy, Rondale Moore has been a solid contributor, especially when he was at his healthiest with the Cardinals. A very good piece to use in the slot, and he could have certainly been an upgrade over a person like KJ Osborne in that respect. Hopefully it isn't anything more serious than that, but we don't know right now. They haven't given us the definitive statement. This is horrible, man. You really do hate to see that. Rachaad White as well, although he is now the number 2 running back behind Bucky Irving in that system, and honestly I think that is the most appropriate way to approach that. He would also go down with a groin injury, and his status for at least the beginning of the season is in limbo as well. Now, yes, Bucky Irving burst onto the scene last year as a rookie, just putting up exceptional performance after exceptional performance and actively stealing away reps from Rachaad White, while Sean Tucker was obviously doing the same thing to a lesser extent. Nevertheless, when Rachaad White is in that offense, it adds another element to their passing game. How many times last season did you see Baker Mayfield have some easy reads with Rachaad White in that backfield? He's a great receiving back. You can focus on all of the outside talent that they have, but you still gotta account for White out of the backfield. And he can create those matchup nightmares as one of the taller running backs of that archetype, while being fast and strong enough to handle those bigger linebackers who might be manned up on him. There were multiple times where he was in the game for the sole purpose of getting that mismatch, and more often than not, they were able to exploit it, get him a few receiving touchdowns last season. And, obviously Irving provides that kind of threat as well, but Rachaad White is more dangerous in that respect at this moment. And even though Irving is probably the guy you're gonna focus your running game on, Rachaad White is still not considered a slouch by them. They want and would love to have him on that offense. And an injury is certainly going to prevent that for at least a little bit. The Texans would sign Jalen Mills. This goes hand in hand with the Jimmie Ward situation because he is already injured at this point, on top of dealing with all this off the field stuff. So he hasn't gotten any sort of practice in during this training camp. He's just been sitting on the sidelines and confronting all of these issues. So you gotta have a backup piece there. And Jalen Mills could serve as that, while also potentially elevating his role. Because even though for whatever reason I didn't have this listed, CJ Gardner-Johnson was also dealing with a knee injury of some sort that is going to keep him out for a pretty good amount of time. Even though they did state in that same headline I did see, he avoided an ACL injury. He avoided the worst of it, but he's still going to miss a good amount of time. Like Jalen Mills, again, a pretty solid role player as a safety. And he would definitely fill that void perfectly for them. But he's going to be asked to elevate his role a little bit with CJ Gardner-Johnson going down like this. I do think, honestly, given his veteran presence and given how D'Amico Ryans can get that defense in line, I do believe that they'll weather the storm with him. They should be a relatively good defense. Maybe it's elevated under Ward, but he is a pretty solid replacement to have. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of drop-off there. Deon Bush would also suffer a left Achilles tendon injury and is going to miss the rest of his NFL season. The Chiefs linebacker, again, looking to establish himself as one of the better players at that position on a roster that could use some more linebacker depth, to be honest with you. And again, that opportunity is just completely robbed from you with something like this. Tyjae Spears, the Titans running back, is also set to miss multiple weeks with what I believe was a lower body injury. Jayden Reed is also going to miss the start of the season due to an injury. Like, it's just all those names in a row could be pretty important players for these teams down the line. Jayden Reed is trying to establish himself as a top receiver still. You know, he had a few great games last season, but nothing too consistent. And that's what the Packers have been trying to search for all this time. A consistent number one wide receiver. Golden could very well fill that role himself as a rookie, and that's why they go out and get him in the first round. But still, outside of that, the depth chart for wide receivers in that organization is consistently shifting. There is nothing of substance there whatsoever. And Reed definitely had a great chance to assert himself as a potential slot guy in this offense. And I think he can still be utilized that way. Obviously, he's going to be much further along than a guy like Savion Williams in that system, who is also a rookie and a damn good option as a gadget player, generally speaking. But, again, he's going to have to get behind the curve a little bit, given the fact that he's dealing with this. And in the NFL, with them always preaching about having the next man step up, is Jayden Reed really going to be afforded that opportunity to come back and execute in the same way with the same amount of reps. There is nothing stopping one of those other wide receivers from being able to usurp him on the depth chart and take away even more attention from him. Like, that's just how it is. 1 second you can be at the top of your game, and the next you can be barely scraping by as a player in the NFL. Now, again, that definitely rings true for a lot of other positions outside of wide receiver, but it can be the same way. Like, he was playing so well last season. And yet, because it wasn't consistent enough, he's still going to be in danger of potentially losing his spot to somebody else. An injury just heightens that even further. The Raiders would sign Terrell Edmunds. He obviously was a former safety for the Steelers. And honestly, when it comes to him, he's just not really all that good. I mean, he's been solid in most of his stops, but clearly there's not been a lot of consistency in his NFL career, especially over the past 2 seasons. I mean, he's played half seasons with the Steelers, the Titans, the Jaguars, and then went back to the Steelers for a second stint. If they're looking for a death piece, I guess that's fine. Because, honestly, with the way that you have operated, it feels as though your other D-back positions are probably set at this point. You guess you could afford to get them, and you need to be able to get somebody for cheap at this stage of your offseason. But I don't know if that was necessarily the option that they would have liked to select there. The Ravens would place Robert Longerbeam, their other rookie cornerback, who was drafted in the late round, on IL. And they would also sign Myles Gaskin as a backup running back. They got a lot of small running backs, by the way. Yeah, you have Derrick Henry obviously leading things off, but Keaton Mitchell, Justice Hill, and now Myles Gaskin? Like, they are trying to compound the power of Derrick Henry perfectly with, I guess, the supposed speed of all 3 of those guys, and the receiving ability of at least Justice Hill at this point. That could make for something even more dangerous, and to just hear that, looking at their rushing attack over just the past few seasons, or honestly ever since Lamar Jackson has been there, to say that they have another dimension that they can unlock. Yeah, I don't think the league wants to deal with that, I'm not going to lie. Quez Watkins would be released from the Cardinals' injury reserve list and released from the team in general due to an injury settlement. It's just getting even more crowded for them in that wide receiver room as they get closer and closer to making decisions on other guys that are actively playing. Seeing as Quez Watkins was just out for this much time, and I'm not even sure how much more time he'll be missing. But it's safe to say that, again, this is a perfect example of what it is I'm talking about. Like, Quez Watkins hasn't really been the greatest wide receiver, but he still had his moments with the Eagles. As other bodies come in and take all that attention away from him, he was shifted out and over to the Steelers. Didn't really get the most amount of reps there. Shifts over to this team, gets hurt, doesn't get in the amount of practice or reps at all. And then the Cardinals just straight up knowing that this is going down, decide to move on from him. It certainly sucks, but I mean, I don't know if that could really come as a surprise. What it does do for Quez Watkins, though, is it gives him the ability to go to any other team he wants. So, we'll see what exactly he decides to do. But I don't know right now. As for the 49ers, with the amount of injuries that they're suffering overall, they would also turn back to signing an old player of theirs, as they would get Jeff Wilson Jr. at the running back position. There are just a lot of question marks about it, and they need as much help as they can get fast. Even though Wilson Jr. isn't the most palatable skill position player out there to have, for the 49ers system specifically, I mean, he's on his, I believe, third stint with the team. So he knows the playbook very well. Let's just get that very clear. He knows the offense. The coach in his career has not changed at all. He would understand. No, this is his second stint with the team. But still, he's got the experience with the squad and how they run things over there. Yeah, I don't expect him to get a massive amount of attention. I mean, he rarely has in his career, but you just gotta be able to fill out your roster if you're the 49ers. That's all you're worried about right now. And what better way to at least work towards doing that than with a familiar face? Alexander Mattison, the now Dolphins running back, after being a Raider last season, is actually going to miss the rest of the season due to a neck injury. I mean, I was watching the game yesterday, and he honestly had some solid reps. You know, you can say what you want about his season last year. The Raiders were not a great running team in the slightest, and his contribution certainly didn't help. But it looked for a second like he could become a pretty respectable piece in this offense. And yet, on a specific play, I don't know, it just carried on for a little while, and then they eventually took him off the field. But I didn't know it was this damn bad. It's like, it's just crushing to see. Landon Dickerson would also suffer a meniscus injury, which is slated to keep him out for a little while. His status for the entire season hasn't been determined yet. It doesn't look like it's going to be a season-ending injury, but he needs to get work done on it, of course. And for that offensive line, as stacked as they still are, having Landon Dickerson hold it down just helps. It just adds to the overall strength that they possess as a unit. And when you're missing at least one of those guys, that's gonna hurt you in some way. So at least for those weeks, you could probably expect production to dip a little bit. Like, they're heavily reliant on their offensive line being able to create all these gaps and all of these second-level mismatches. That is how they operate. And missing any one of those core guys is tough. Even though they have some solid backups, you're not going to find a current Eagles backup being able to replicate what it is that Dickerson does. So it certainly sucks. But, yeah, I that'll do it for this one. I don't even think I can say that y'all enjoyed this or should have. It's just, again, riddled with injuries and unfortunate situations. That's definitely something you hate to see. But I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.